The station diner was not a place where strangers stood out. It was noisy, smoky with recycled air, and filled with the smell of cheap cooking oils and hot engine grease from docked ships. Travelers came and went, usually tired miners, smugglers with sharp eyes, or freighter pilots who slumped into the booths like broken machines waiting for repair. But on that day, something different happened. A human walked in. Humans were rare out here. So far from Earth, out here, most people only knew them through stories. To some, they were ghosts of an aggressive past. Fighters who had clawed their way off their small blue planet and burned their mark across the stars. To others, they were just rumors, strange wanderers who lived short but fierce lives. Few in this part of the galaxy had ever seen one in person. The alien waitress behind the counter noticed him immediately. Her name was Sharith, and her insectoid body was covered in soft plates of emerald green chitin. She had seen countless species, each stranger than the last. But this one, this human made her antennae stiffen. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired she saw in most customers after long shifts or bad jobs, but something deeper. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow yet steady, as if they had stared too long into something heavy, something that would not let him rest. His clothes were practical, worn flight leathers patched in more places than she could count. Still, he walked with a certain weight slower than most, yet not stumbling. A quiet determination followed him, as though even the act of moving forward was a promise he refused to break. Sharith swallowed nervously, her mandibles clicking once. She grabbed the datapad for orders and walked up to him. She tried to sound polite, professional, though she felt her voice shake slightly. "Welcome, traveler," she said. "Seat for one." The human's head lifted, and his eyes met hers. They were not bright. They were not warm. Yet there was something in them that made her chest tighten. A kind of storm, held back, but always there. He gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said quietly. His voice was low, rough, like gravel dragged across metal. "Just me." She led him to a booth by the viewport. Outside, the stars glittered in silence, uncaring about the lives that flickered briefly beneath them. The man sat without a word. He didn't even look at the stars, just at the table, as though the universe outside had nothing left to offer him. Sharith tried to act normal. She had learned that humans liked warmth in their greetings, so she gave a small smile. "What can I get you?" He shrugged. "Whatever's hot, doesn't matter." That answer made her uneasy. Most species who traveled cared about food, about taste or fuel, or at least something familiar. This human asked for none of it. Just something warm, just enough to keep moving. She brought him the daily special, heavy stew thick with root vegetables and spice. He ate quickly, not like someone starving, but like someone who knew food was fuel, and fuel meant survival. Every bite was measured, steady, like part of a ritual. Sharith hovered nearby, antennae twitching. She was curious, but she also felt a strange fear. She had heard that humans were unpredictable, dangerous even when they didn't mean to be. But this man wasn't dangerous in that way. He was dangerous in another way, quiet, determined and unwilling to stop. She forced herself to try small talk. "Where are you from, human?" For a moment, his hand froze halfway to his mouth. His shoulders stiffened. Slowly, he set the spoon down and stared into the cup of stew as though it were an endless void. "Doesn't matter," said softly. His voice was heavier now. "Not anymore." Sharith felt her mandibles click in discomfort. She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone warned her not to. It wasn't anger, it was grief. A grief so deep it sat in his bones. The silence stretched between them. The other customers kept eating, drinking, talking, but to Sharith, the diner suddenly felt quiet, as though everything else had faded away. Finally, she gave him another refill, sliding the steaming cup toward him. He gave a small nod of thanks, finished the meal, and stood up. He left credits on the table, more than the food was worth. At the door, he paused. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it reached her clearly. "Thanks. I needed that." Then he walked out into the station corridors. his figure swallowed by the crowd. Sharith stood, frozen by the booth. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story. But something in her told her she had just seen a flame burning inside. A man who had already lost too much in WA was still refusing to go out, and for reasons she could not explain. She hoped he would come back. The next cycle in the diner began like any other. Sharith cleaned tables, checked the food dispensers, prepared herself for another long day of serving tired travelers. The same faces appeared, miners covered in dust, traders bargaining over bills, smugglers whispering secrets too fast for her translator to catch. She tried to push the memory of the human aside. She told herself he was just another customer, a traveler passing through. People came and went every day. She had seen thousands, maybe tens of thousands. She should not care about one more face among the endless flow. But she did. She kept remembering. The way he had looked at the table instead of the stars. The way his voice cracked when he said, "Not anymore." The way his shoulders carried something invisible but heavy, like a mountain only he could see. So when the diner's door slid open with a soft hiss, and the human walked in again, her heart skipped. He looked almost the same as before, tired, worn down, with eyes that seemed older than his body. But this time, something about him felt even heavier, as if the universe had pressed down on him a little more during the short time. He was gone. Sharith's mandibles clicked softly in surprise. Most travelers who stopped here took long breaks before continuing their journey. Her own species could sleep for entire cycles after heavy work. Yet here was this human again, barely one rotation later. As if rest meant nothing to him, he walked to the same booth by the viewport without a word. It was as if the seat belonged to him now, though he claimed nothing. He simply sat down, folding his hands together, waiting. Sharith approached with her datapad. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Back so soon?" His lips curved just a little, not enough to be called a smile, more like the ghost of one. "Yeah, guess so." The waitress tilted her head, antennae flicking in confusion. "You are already ready again?" The human gave a quiet laugh, though it sounded tired. "Don't really have the luxury of resting. Not for long." Sharith did not understand. In her hive, when someone was injured or exhausted, the entire colony would stop and let them recover. Rest was survival. Pushing without it was madness. Yet this man treated exhaustion like a stranger he could not afford to greet. She decided not to press him further. Instead, she asked, "The same order?" He nodded. "Whatever's hot." She went to the kitchen and served him the stew again, though this time she added an extra portion without charging him. She told herself it was just because he had overpaid last time. But the truth was, she wanted him to eat more. Something deep in her chest urged her to give him strength, even if it was only through food. He ate differently this time. Not as quickly, not as hungry. Each bite was slower, more thoughtful. His eyes drifted sometimes to the window, but he still didn't really look at the stars. It was as though he feared what they might remind him of. Sharith stood nearby, pretending to clean, but she was watching him. Every movement of his hands, every sigh, every pause, it told her a story she couldn't quite piece together. Finally, she gathered her courage. "Human, what do you search for?" He stopped eating for a moment. His eyes rose to meet hers, and she felt a chill. There was fire in them, buried deep under the exhaustion, but fire nonetheless. "Not searching," he said. His voice was calm but sharp. "Just continuing." She frowned. "Continuing what?" His answer was short, almost whispered. "What's left?" Those two words settled heavy in her chest. She did not ask again. When he finished his meal, he placed the credits on the table. Again, more than enough. When she tried to protest, he shook his head. "Keep it. For the extra." Before leaving, he paused again, just as before. His voice carried the same quiet weight, the same storm hidden beneath it. "Thanks. You don't know how much this helps." Then he left. Vanishing into the corridors like a shadow swallowed by the crowd, Sharith stood by his empty booth for a long time. She could not understand him, not fully. Why come back so soon? Why move forward without pause? Why carry something that was clearly tearing him apart? Yet she felt drawn to him like a moth to flame. She wanted to know more, and for the first time in her life, she hoped deeply, almost desperately, that tomorrow the door would hiss open again, he would return. The station was always restless. Engines roared in the docks, cargo shuttles came and went, and traders argued about credits in voices that shook the air. For most, each cycle felt the same. But for Sharith, something had changed. She was waiting. Ever since the human first came through the diner's doors, she found herself glancing at the entrance more often. Each time it hissed open, her antennae twitched, her eyes searching. She told herself it was foolish humans were wanderers. He could already be gone, heading toward some distant star, never to return. And yet, she hoped. When the door finally slid open and that same figure stepped inside, her chest tightened with something strange and unexplainable. Relief, the human returned. He looked as worn as ever, but not weaker. If anything, his steps carried the same strange determination. As though his body refused to yield no matter how heavy the weight inside him grew. His clothes were dustier, his boots scraped, his hair untidy. But his eyes, those deep, haunted eyes, were still sharp. He did not look around the diner. He did not hesitate. He walked directly to the same booth by the viewport and sat down. Folding his arms on the table, as if it were the only safe place left in the universe, Sharith approached, datapad in hand. She tried to keep her voice steady, though she felt her mandibles tremble. "You came back." The human looked at her, a faint flicker in his tired expression. Maybe amusement. Maybe just recognition. "Guess I did." She tilted her head. "So soon?" This time, he almost smiled. Almost. It was small, faint, but it was real. "Yeah, didn't think I'd be ready again this quick, huh?" Her antennae twitched nervously. "That is correct. Most species, after long travel, they need days, sometimes weeks, before they return. But you are already ready again?" His eyes lowered to the table. He tapped his fingers once, slowly. Then he answered, "Don't really have the luxury of resting. Not for long." Sharith felt a shiver crawl through her chest plates. Luxury. To her kind, rest was not a luxury, it was life. To deny the body its pause was unthinkable. Yet this man dismissed it as though it were a gift he could never afford. She took his order, though she already knew what he would say. "The same," he murmured. "Something hot." As she walked to the kitchen, she could not stop the questions filling her mind. What drove him so hard? What pushed him past the point of rest? Why did he carry himself like someone at war with the very air around him? She returned with the stew, this time sliding the bowl gently in front of him. He gave another small nod of thanks. He ate slower than before. His spoon paused often, his eyes drifting not toward the stars beyond the viewport, but to something far away inside himself. Sharith felt her chest ache watching him. He seemed like a man sitting between two worlds, the one outside the glass, and the one he carried in his heart. She wanted to speak, but feared breaking whatever fragile thread held him together. Yet silence pressed on her like a weight. Finally, she asked softly, "Why do you keep moving? What is it you are chasing?" The spoon stilled. His hand lowered. He did not look at her immediately. For a long time she thought he might not answer at all. Then he lifted his gaze. It was not anger she saw there. It was not coldness. It was fire buried deep beneath exhaustion, a flame that refused to die. "I'm not chasing," he said quietly. "I'm continuing." Her antennae tilted. "Continuing what?" The human's jaw tightened. His eyes drifted toward the stars, and for the first time, she saw him truly look at them. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight like iron. "What's left?" Those words hit her harder than she expected. She didn't understand all of it, but she felt the pain behind them. Pain and resolve. He finished the stew in silence. When he arose, he placed the credits on the table against too many, more than the food deserved. She wanted to protest, but his faint shake of the head silenced her. At the door, he paused. just like the times before. His voice was low, but it carried straight to her heart. "Thank you. I'll be back." And then he left. Sharith stood frozen for a long time, her mandibles trembling. She thought of his words continuing what's left. She had never known a being who could lose so much and still rise so soon. To her, he seemed impossible. And yet he was human, and that she was beginning to understand made all the difference. The diner was quieter that cycle. The usual miners were gone, the smugglers had found new corners to whisper in, and only a few tired freighter pilots filled the seats. The hum of the air filters and the faint hiss of the kitchen vents became the music of the room, Shaw. Rith was wiping down a counter when the door slid open again. She did not even need to look. She felt it, the shift in the air, faint weight pressing against her chest. The human had returned. He looked more worn this time. A bruise marked his jaw, fresh and dark. His knuckles were scraped, as though he had fought with someone or something not long ago. His steps were steady, but slower, like every muscle was aching. Yet still, he came. Sharith's antennae twitched with unease. This was not rest, she thought. This was punishment. A body was not meant to carry so much without breaking. He sat at his usual booth by the viewport. He didn't even glance at the menu. He simply folded his arms on the table and stared at nothing. Sharith walked over carefully. She placed the datapad down, but did not ask for his order. Instead, she spoke softly. "You look hurt." The human's eyes lifted. There was no denial in them, only acceptance. "I'll heal." She tilted her head, mandibles clicking. "You push yourself too far." He gave the faintest smile, but it was bitter. "That's what we do." She wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. She brought him his food extra again, though she did not say it aloud, and set it down gently. He ate in silence at first. Every motion was slower, heavier, as though even lifting the spoon cost him effort. Sharith stood nearby, pretending to check tables, but her eyes never left him. Finally, she could not hold it in. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Human, why do you push yourself so hard? Most species rest. Most take time. You do not stop." Even when broken, spoon clinked against the bowl. He set it down, his hand lingering on the edge of the table. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment, Sharith feared she had crossed some line, asked something forbidden. But then, slowly, he lifted his head. For the first time, she saw it, not just the exhaustion, not just the silence. She saw inside him. And what she saw was fire and ash both, burning together in a way that made her chest ache. "My crew's gone," he said at last. The words were simple, but the weight behind them filled the entire room. Sharith's breath caught. "Gone." His eyes lowered again. His voice was quiet, rough, like stone breaking under pressure. "Ship destroyed. Out there, near the belt, we were ambushed. They didn't make it." Her antennae trembled. She had seen death before, in the hive wars of her people, but never had she seen one carry it like this alone, holding not just grief, but the memory of every soul lost. The human's hands clenched slowly into fists. His voice hardened. "But there's still something I can do. There's always something I can do. If I stop now, if I rest too long, then they died for nothing." Sharith felt something deep in her chest, an ache, sharp and raw. Her people did not understand grief like this. When one fell, another took their place. The hive continued. Individuals were pieces, not legacies. But here sat a man who carried his dead with him, refusing to let their memory fade. Her mandibles clicked softly. She whispered without meaning to, "So soon. And yet you rise again." The human looked at her. For a moment, his tired eyes softened, almost gentle. "That's what it means. We fall, but we rise. Because someone has to." Sharith lowered her gaze, feeling something she had never felt before. A mixture of fear, admiration, and sorrow. She wanted to say more, to comfort him, but the words would not come. What comfort could she offer to a being who carried the weight of ghosts? He finished his meal in silence, though slower than before. When he stood, he placed the credits down as always. Too much again. At the door, he paused. His voice was low, but it carried more than before. Thank you for listening. Then he walked out into the endless noise of the station. Leaving behind an empty booth that felt heavier than any crowded room, Sharith stood frozen, her hands trembling. She had asked for truth, and he had given it. Now she carried a piece of his weight too, and she knew she would never forget it. The station rotated in its endless cycle. Ships docked, cargo unloaded, fuel pumped, credits exchanged. To most it was just another ordinary day in a place where nothing truly changed. But for Sharith, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She found herself thinking about the human even when he wasn't there. She remembered his tired voice, the weight in his words, the way he clenched his fists when he spoke about his fallen crew. His grief lingered in her mind like a shadow that refused to fade. When the diner door hissed open once more and he walked in again, she felt her heart tighten. She had expected him now, almost counted on him returning. But still, every time she saw him, it felt like seeing a storm come alive in a single man. He sat at his booth by the viewport, the same seat he always chose. This time, he didn't fold his arms or stare at the table. Instead, he leaned back slowly, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. Sharith approached carefully, datapad in hand. She hesitated before speaking. You are here again. The human gave a soft grunt, a sound between agreement and exhaustion. Yeah, she tilted her head, antennae flicking. Even after what you told me, you keep moving forward. He looked at her now, his eyes steady, carrying that same quiet fire she had seen before. What else is there? Sharith lowered her gaze, unsure how to answer. Her people were different. In her hive, if tragedy struck, the colony absorbed the loss. No single individual carried the burden of memory. The hive survived by forgetting quickly. That was survival. That was life. But this human, he did the opposite. He carried his dead with him. He carried their names, their faces, their final breaths. Every step he took was not just his own. It was for those who could not walk anymore. Sharith set down the stew in front of him, but her mandibles trembled as she spoke. My people do not understand grief like yours. In the hive, if one falls, another replaces them. We do not carry memories the way you do. When the war ended, our dead were left behind. Their names forgotten. But you, her voice shook. You carry them inside you, even when it hurts. The human picked up the spoon, stirred the stew once, and then looked back at her. His voice was calm, but behind it was steel. Because they matter. Because if I don't carry them, no one else will. Sharith froze, his words sinking into her like a blade of truth. She had never thought of memory as duty, of grief as responsibility. But he wore it like armor, even when it cut into him. She whispered, almost to herself, so soon. Already ready again, even after so much loss. The human's lips curved into the faintest smile, but there was no joy in it, only sorrow. That's what we do. We break. We burn, but we rise. Again and again. Her mandibles clicked, and she felt something in her chest she had never known before. Admiration, fear, respect. He ate in silence after that. She let him, but her mind was racing. She thought of the whispers she had heard from other species stories about humans. Some called them reckless. Some called them dangerous. Some said they were cursed, unable to let go of pain the way others did. But now, she understood something the others didn't. Humans were not cursed. They were different. They burned brighter because they carried more inside them, more pain, more love, more memory. And that fire once lit refused to die. When he finished, he stood and placed the credits down as always. At the door, he paused once more. His voice was quiet, but she felt it like a vibration in her very bones. They live as long as I keep going. That's why I don't stop. And then he left, swallowed by the crowd outside. Sharith stood frozen, staring at the empty booth. She thought of her hive, her people who forgot their fallen without hesitation. She thought of how easy it was to move forward when you left the past behind. But humans. Humans were different. They moved forward while carrying the weight of every loss. And somehow, impossibly, they kept rising. That was the memory of humans. Not just survival, not just fire, but the refusal to let anyone truly be forgotten. And Sharith, for the first time in her long life, found herself wishing her people could learn that same fire. The diner felt different that day. Sharith couldn't explain why, but the air seemed heavier, as though something unseen had wrapped itself around the walls. The usual chatter of customers, the clinking of plates, even the steady hum of the station, all seemed quieter. She was nervous. Her antennae twitched every time the door hissed open. She didn't know what she was expecting, but part of her already knew. When the human entered, her chest tightened painfully. He looked worse than ever. His face was pale, shadows under his eyes deeper than before. His jaw carried a dark bruise, and there was dried blood near his temple. His clothes were torn in places, as if he had been through more than one fight in the short time since she had last seen him. His hand shook slightly as he lowered himself into the booth. Sharitha's mandibles clicked in alarm. This was no longer just exhaustion. This was breaking. She hurried over, her voice trembling. You should not be here. You should be resting. Healing. The human looked up at her, and though his body was weak, his eyes still burned with that same terrible fire. If I rest too long, I won't get back up. Her chest ached at the words. You will burn yourself out. You will fall apart. No one can keep going like this. He gave a faint, tired smile, though it was filled with sadness. That's the thing about us. We fall, we break, but we stand again, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts.
Arith froze.
Her antennae trembled, her mind racing. She didn't understand how one being could keep forcing himself forward when his body was clearly begging to stop. For her kind, exhaustion meant pause. Wounds meant retreat. But this human treated pain as fuel, as proof that he was still alive. She set down the stew in front of him, her hands shaking slightly. Please, she whispered. Eat. At least eat. He picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and forced himself to eat. Each bite looked like effort, each swallow a battle. Yet he did not stop. Sharith could not hold it back anymore. The words spilled out of her, heavy and desperate. Why do you do this to yourself? Why do you not stop even for a moment? Your body's breaking, and still you rise again. Why? What is it worth? The spoon clinked against the bowl. He set it down, staring at the table. For a long time, he said nothing. She thought he might ignore her, or walk away, or retreat into silence as he had before. But then he lifted his head. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time she truly saw the depth inside them. Not just grief, not just fire, something beyond both. My crew, he said quietly. They trusted me. They followed me. And when the ship burned, I lived. They didn't. I can't change that. But I can keep going. As long as I breathe, their story doesn't end. His voice cracked, but he pushed on, forcing each word like a blade cutting through him. If I stop, then they're gone. Truly gone. But if I keep moving, if I keep fighting, then in some way, they're still here. With me, Sharith felt something sharp pierce her chest, though she had no word for it in her language. It was not just sorrow. It was not just admiration. It was something deeper, a realization that she was standing in front of a being whose entire soul was built on carrying the weight of others. She whispered, trembling, you are impossible. The human gave a faint, broken laugh. Maybe, but that's what we are. We get up even when the universe thinks we shouldn't. He pushed the empty bowl aside, stood shakily, and placed more credits on the table than the meal cost. His hand trembled as he set them down, but his eyes were steady. At the door he paused, as always. He looked back at her, his voice low but unyielding. Don't worry about me. Worry about the ones who don't get back up. I'll rise again. Then he walked out, his body unsteady but his steps firm. Swallowed once more by the endless noise of the station, Sharith remained frozen, staring at the empty booth, her chest aching as though something inside her had broken too. She had thought humans were strange before, reckless, stubborn, unpredictable. But now she understood something else. They were relentless. Even at the breaking point, when every part of them screamed to stop, they rose again. And that, she realized, was what made them truly terrifying and truly needed. The diner had become quieter since the humans' last visit. Sharith noticed at every cycle. The laughter of the miners, the harsh voices of traders, even the usual background noise of arguments had all felt thinner. Weaker somehow, but maybe it wasn't the diner that had changed. Maybe it was her. She found herself glancing at the door more often now. Every time it hissed open, her antennae twitched, her chest tightened. She expected him no. She hoped for him. The man who always sat in the same booth, who ate his meal slowly, who spoke with a voice that carried the weight of ghosts. But this time, he didn't come. Not that cycle. Not the one after. Not the one after that. At first she told herself he was only delayed. Humans were strange wanderers. Maybe he was simply caught up in repairs, or waiting for a job, or moving carefully through dangerous space. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence of his absence grew heavier, and then she heard the whispers. Traders in the corner? Booth spoke of a lone ship that had struck hard against a band of raiders in the outer sectors. The raiders had been brutal, destroying entire convoys, taking hostages, burning colonies for profit. They had seemed unstoppable until a single human ship appeared. They said the pilot fought like a man possessed, pushing a battered vessel beyond its limits, refusing to retreat even when the odds were impossible. He hit the raiders again and again, crippling their fleet, scattering survivors into the void. They said he should have been dead 3 times over, that any other pilot would have collapsed long before the final strike, but not him. He fought until the raiders broke, until the convoys were safe, till the fires were put out. When Sharith overheard this, she felt her chest ache. She did not need to ask the pilot's name. She already knew. The human had not stopped. He had risen again that night. When the diner was empty and the stars glimmered quietly through the viewport, Sharith carried a fresh cup to his usual booth. She set it down on the table as if he were still there, sitting across from her with tired eyes and a faint, broken smile. She lowered herself onto the opposite seat, staring at the untouched drink. Her mandibles trembled. Slowly, she whispered into the silence, "So soon. Already ready again, even when you should have fallen." She closed her eyes, remembering his voice, his fire, his stubborn refusal to let go of the dead. She thought of her hive, her people who had always forgotten the fallen because forgetting was easier. And she realized how much weaker they were because of it. The human had carried his crew with him, carried their memory into every step, every fight, every breath. And because of that, they had not truly died. Their fire had burned through him and through him. It had spread further to the convoys saved, to the traders who now spoke of him in awe. To her own heart, she touched the cup gently, her claws resting against the warm surface. For the first time, she wished she could carry memory the way he did. She wished her people could understand. Perhaps one day she thought they would. Outside the viewport, a freighter drifted slowly away from the station, its engines glowing like a fading ember. Sharith watched it disappear into the dark and felt something stir inside her. Not fear, not grief, but respect. The galaxy told stories about humans that they were reckless, dangerous, cursed to burn too fast. But now she understood. They were not cursed. They were chosen. Chosen to carry fire where no one else could. Chosen to rise again and again. When others would stay down, she whispered once more to the empty booth, her voice shaking but certain. That is what it means to be human. To rise again, no matter how many times you fall. And though he was gone, though the seat across from her was empty, Sharith knew the fire he carried would never truly leave, because it was not just his, it was humanity's, and it would burn in the galaxy forever.